All your attention, please. We can begin. Go ahead and fill in some seats here. There's still some seats out front. I always appreciate those who actually go to the front and sit in the front. That's very admirable. Council member. It's the council. That's all here, the folks that are up here. So I appreciate you coming in. Find a place to sit. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I'm Dave Kleis, Mayor of the City of St. Cloud, and we've got a distinguished panel of folks here that are going to talk tonight about something that's is not only a priority. It's a priority for any community. There's not a community in the country or in the world that its core needs to be it must have that vitality. It must be solid. It must be it must be resilient. And it's no different than our core and our downtown. Downtowns are an important piece of any community. We all grew up. No matter where you grew up, it was, I think, that downtown. And the immortal words of Platula Clark was what I'm listening to all day now, because the downtown song just can't get out of my head. But downtown is something that for a number of years has been a focus, and so I appreciate all of you being here. I see a lot of faces around this room. People have done so much for our community as a whole and our region for a whole. And tonight's summit is really about bringing everybody together and focusing on an asset that we have, looking at the opportunities and the strengths that we have, understanding the challenges and that we have, but being able to move forward with a vision, that is really that downtown piece. We are blessed with so many assets in our community. And I think among those, the most important assets is the human assets, the people that are in this room that are always willing to step forward. If I start looking around and seeing names of people or started mentioning names, these are people that have been leaders in this community for many, many years, and leaders that have been here just for a short period of time, but have really showed their skill and their ability to bring people together. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a lot of leaders. It's going to take a lot of folks willing to move forward with a shared vision to really make our downtown prosper and be the downtown that's really the envy of our community. We've got a lot of the assets, and we're going to hear from experts. It's always important, I think in almost everything you do, is to bring people that live at least 60 miles away from your house or your home or your town. There's some folks that live way farther than that are experts in what they do, and I'm going to be introducing them in a bit and talk a little bit about on the panel here too. And there's another chair here, but Ken Holman, CEO of CentraCare, is here too, but he's back here, but he'll be speaking here in a little bit too, and he'll be up here soon. But I want to talk a little bit about, and now the technology piece is what. So I'm gonna go into a little bit about. Is this the right one? See, it also takes somebody from the East Coast to come in here and tell me how to operate this. That's why he's one of the top urbanists in the country, to show me how he even know how to use the technology that our folks put together. But you've got some folks here that are experts in what they do. But I'm here to really talk a little bit, and you'll hear tonight from Toby and Chris, Ken, and myself. They're going to lay out an external view. And I think that's important. We oftentimes any community is its worst critic. You really don't see what you have. You don't see the assets. Sometimes you just focus constantly on the obstacles, and you focus on those liabilities, but you don't see the opportunities that you have to move some things forward. And you're going to see that tonight. And see from an outside perspective. Both Toby and Chris will talk. They did the research, not me. They're going to talk and really give you an analysis of what we have, and they'll give comparisons to communities around the country or even around the world that have really transformed their downtowns. I'm a history major from St. Cloud State University. Robin Wacker's back here, president of St. Cloud State University, an alum. I'm an alum. Robin, thank you for being here. I majored in political science and history. I figured out what to do with the political science, the history piece. I just give tours and talk a lot about history. So I'm gonna, as Matt Glazeman said, I start talking about history, and I gave a tour today. I think we talked a lot about history, so I'll try to keep this. But downtown has always really been that focal point of our community. Downtown through the years has really been that hub. It really is where the community and the region came together, not only from the issue of commerce, but from the issue of transportation. If you look, you go some of these. It's where that middle, upper, and lower town came together. The downtown was that middle town. Actually, the glue that cemented the two areas together was downtown. From St. Germain Street, Fifth Avenue. These were streets where commerce took place. So if you look at some of these, 1895, 1910, 1950s, and there have been significant transitions of downtown, and sometimes we go back in history a little bit, where things change. I mean, if you look at even from a transit perspective, for those of you, Jeff was around back in 1890s, but if you go back to some of those days, you know there was a train that took you from downtown St. Cloud to Waite Park, and not a train, a trolley, a horse-drawn trolley. Then it was an electric trolley, and then you had Metrobus, and eventually the transit center. So you had a lot of that. What really was a transformation, and at each time there were times in this community where something happened where it gave an opportunity for a reboot, something that was significant in our area that gave an opportunity to say, wow, we're going to do things differently now. Why don't we take advantage of whether it's new technology or whether it's some type of situation, some global pandemic or whatever it may be, but there's an opportunity to reboot. Or an opportunity to take advantage of a technology. In fact, it was the river that brought us all here. So the Mississippi River is really what brought those settlers here, and the river was the transportation artery. Transportation is a big part of it. Transportation, the river, is what bound this area together. In a lot of communities, it divides, and when I talk about downtown tonight, I want to make sure that I emphasize this more than once. Downtown is the east and west side of the river. Downtown is not separated by a river. It's embraced, and we need to embrace the river to connect the east and the west side of our community. That's the important piece of this. It's not a division. It's similar to the street that we have here, Highway 23. It's not a division. It actually is another opportunity for us to connect the university to our area. The railroad tracks is not a division. It's an opportunity to connect the north side to the downtown area. There's our opportunities that we can figure out to overcome those things to be more of a uniting area, and we've done that over the years. I think probably the biggest, obviously when the railroad, you started with the river and then the railroad came in. We wouldn't be called the Granite City if it wasn't for the railroad. You can't ship a lot of granite on the river back in those days, and you couldn't ship it in a lot of other ways. So you had to ship it by the railroad. All of a sudden, this community boomed in industry because of the granite, and that was because of the railroad that came in here. And now, of course, I think probably the next biggest thing that was a transition was a challenge for a lot of communities, and that was the mall. In the 1960s, when Crossroads was built, I think the community leaders at that time worried and panicked and created what a lot of communities did. You created the ring road, you closed off the road. A lot of those things took place. Not overly popular for a period of time, and they eventually were reversed later on. But that was to focus on that piece of downtown that people thought they would lose with the retail going out. In a lot of places they did. But in our case, we've got a tremendous asset here. And COVID has created another opportunity. Where it used to be you would bring all kinds of jobs and people down to work in those jobs into a downtown area. But a lot of those jobs now people are working from home. And a lot of those places where even one of our largest employers, and there's someone here from Capital One down here, they added more jobs, it's just from home. So you either have a lot of jobs, you have a lot of people, or you have people living. And so the focus really is living, and you're going to hear a lot of that from our experts, is people living downtown, and to make that commitment to get people to live downtown. And that's really our focus, and that's really some of the discussion we're going to have tonight, but we have to make it a priority. Again, we have a lot of things, a lot of the assets. I'll let the folks outside of our area talk a little bit about our assets and our liabilities and what we need to do. Otherwise, I could go on for a couple hours about those, but I won't. So I'm going to slip right through that slide. That's the fastest I went past the slide. Jeff knows this. I've been to council meetings. It goes forever. So I'm just going to, the vision that we have is a private-public partnership. This will not happen This will not happen. Not one person can come up here and say, we're gonna have a vision and we're gonna get this done. This will take a room full of people, and the fact that there are a lot of you here tonight, and that is grateful to see that. But this will take a lot of leaders, a lot of folks actually taking a vision for us. We've done visions on this area. This is the nice thing about this. You don't really advance a vision. I could come up here and say, here, we could have experts saying, here's your vision. No, we've done all of that work. We have a comprehensive plan. And one of the things that St. Cloud has been known for over the years, we've won awards in planning. We've won international awards in planning for best planning in the country, in the world actually, at a LibCom award. We've done that more. So we've done that planning. Our comprehensive plan was something that is the vision from the community. It is a bottom-up approach. There's no vision, there's any planning that you do can't happen unless the public supports it. That's been done. There are visions, there are maps, there are all kinds of drawings of downtown. We've done a study on the east side. We did an east side visioning. We did a downtown visioning. Those plans aren't old. They may be pieces of them used, but they're on a shelf. We're not going to keep them on a shelf. It's a matter of taking that vision, refining that vision, creating the strategy, and then getting it done. And making sure that we take that vision that we've spent a lot of hours and a lot of people in this room, that, this is a vision created by leaders. You take a vision that you have and you advance it forward. Oftentimes obstacles prevent you from that happening. And I can tell you one of the biggest obstacles for the last 2 years for almost anybody in this room was COVID. The results of COVID changed a lot of things. The workforce is different. Where people work, where people live is so much different than where we've never had this challenge in finding workers. And what do you do? Well, how do you attract workers? You first of all have to have a vital community. Downtown is another vibrant part of that. You have to have parks. You have to have things where people want to. It used to be bring the jobs and the people would come to those jobs. Now it's bring the people to come to the jobs that exist. So you really have to change that focus. And downtown is a big part of that. And so that vision exists, but we have to move that vision forward. And I show you, by the way, these maps up here, some people say, this is the east side of St. Cloud and the downtown. This is the vision of the east and west side. These are maps that have already been drawn. This isn't exactly the way it looks right now. This is part of the vision. A lot of those buildings you see are buildings that were part of that process that we went through to say, this is maybe what you need here. You need some development in this area. Maybe you need a hotel. Maybe you need some housing. And so that's what you see on both the east side. And you see a much nicer bridge here that's a bit more walkable. And you're going to hear a lot about that walkability because, again, things come back the way they were. You've got to make sure that it's a walkable place where people want to live and walk to. So you see that vision in these maps. And I'm going to say right at the beginning that the downtown, a couple of things that I'm going to announce tonight that we're going to do. First of all, in the area of economic development, this is the city's top priority in economic development. We've had lots of discussions over the years with the councils, a number of council members here. This is our priority for a city when it comes to economic development, is downtown revitalization. So it is our top priority, and I think Toby might even say it, but I've heard him say it in a different presentation, where if it's not your first or second priority, then it's a waste of your time. This has to be a priority for a community, is the downtown, so this is a priority in economic development. So in order to make it a priority, we have to actually do something. We have to be bold in what we do, and we have to reach for a goal, and a goal that is achievable, but a goal that might not be, it's not something we're going to do tomorrow, but achievable and something that certainly has been done in a lot of communities. I'm going to be appointing a task force. I don't know any other word to use here, but it's a task force, a group of folks, a group of leaders in this community. And I don't do this often. I don't have a lot of task force, but I can tell you a task force that I created a number of years ago. In fact, I was reminded of as I'm coming in because I see Dave Greenis in the back here, who chaired that task force. Dave Greenis, a former Commerce Commissioner, former legislator, chaired a task force on economic development. That's the last task force we did on economic development. It led to the creation of an EDA for the city of St. Cloud. We now have a focus on economic development. It's now 11 years. Kathy Mihelich is our EDA director. The first and only, so she's historic in that respect. She's been here for 11 years. Kathy's somewhere in the room, her and Lindsay. But we created an economic development authority. It also led to the creation of the Greater St. Cloud Development Corporation, the Greater St. Cloud Development Corporation. It led to that. We used to have what was called the partnership, and that we transformed how we did regionally, and that's been a great organization that has really led in the area of economic development for our region. And I know I see Patty Gartland's here, and and I remember, I think one of the founders, I don't know if Bob White's here. Bob was one of the first folks that came to a lot of those meetings in the past. But that task force led to that. It took leaders willing to be committed and led it. And the only way this is going to happen, it can't be government-led. This has to be a partnership, a private-public leadership, and actually the focus really has to be the private sector. Most of the property is owned by the private sector. Most of the development takes place for the private sector. So it really has to be led by a lot of people willing to do that, and we're going to do that. And well, there is a public piece of it. There's absolutely a public piece to it, especially when it comes to walkability, the infrastructure. We got to make sure, first of all, we don't have regulations and rules that make it hard for you to develop. That's extremely important because oftentimes government can be an impediment to development. We won't want to see that happen. We need to make sure that there's an ability to do that. We also have tools. We have from tax increment financing to, and you'll see a little later, we have property that can be developed in our downtown area. But it also takes that partnership, and I think it takes a bold partnership with the state. I know we got some legislators here. I see Senator Putnam. I see Representative Wogermont. Representative Perryman, Representative-elect. You've got a few ways to be sworn in. But I've had a chance to talk to, we've got a great delegation to this area that is going to, and this isn't new in Minnesota. What's the number one area of employment in this state? Number one, healthcare. Healthcare. What are the 3 top regional centers in Minnesota? Duluth, Rochester, St. Cloud. St. Cloud's actually a little bigger if you look at our region in population. If you add the small towns around, if you look at those as a region, we're a larger population center. So you don't have to go very far to see what the legislature is invested in because healthcare are those jobs. That's the important, especially in greater Minnesota. Those are the jobs. Our largest employer is Centricare, and Ken's going to be talking here at the end. Centricare is our largest employer. It's the fastest growing part of our community. St. Cloud Hospital, Centricare has been one of the top hospitals, top 50 hospitals in the country. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about what the state's commitment has been to Rochester. Over $500 million were invested in Rochester to bring advance to connect Rochester. Over $100 million in Duluth. Similar healthcare and to connect the downtowns. So I'm not going to throw out a dollar amount, but it's going to be more than Duluth and maybe more than Rochester. But we are going to commit. That is what the commitment we need, and that is the infrastructure piece to it. That is the part where you take the bridge. That's where you try to overcome Division Street, where you overcome the railroad tracks to connect the Fifth Avenue, where you connect Lake George and that underpass, where you create opportunities. We have a lot of folks from Stearns County, a lot of folks in Stearns County looking at some plans in the future. That's going to be a very costly thing too. How do we partner in the public safety area, in the commerce area, in the walkability? There are some barriers that we need, but we really need to create that connectivity. Was it a benefit to Rochester? Absolutely, it was a benefit to Rochester. Was it a benefit to Duluth? Absolutely, it was a benefit to Duluth. And when Rochester, Duluth, and St. Cloud are benefited, the state of Minnesota has a benefit because the job force is in. We are the heart of Minnesota and central Minnesota. So to me, this is really easy. It's a harder legislative push. But it's not like you don't have some extra money hanging around. You've already been asked to spend all of it probably. But the task force really is to take our vision, take that, and over the next several months to define what that request is, and the bonding year technically is next year. So to have that to the governor by the summer and have a request. And we don't just stop, we don't just start there. We're actually kickstarting some things that have gone before that. So that will be part of what we're talking about here tonight, but we need to be bold. We need to be aggressive. We need to take something that we haven't done, in a long time, because it's important. It's important to the survival, the vitality of our downtown. Our downtown is important not only for the city of St. Cloud, but the city of St. Cloud is the core city in the region. So it's important to all 3 counties. It's important to all of the communities around here that we do that. So I'm going to stop and introduce Toby.
Well, welcome everyone. So yeah, as Dave said, Toby Peter. I came over here from Spalt, Germany. And in the room, I see many familiar faces who've actually been over there. And all of you who have not, I certainly encourage you to at some point check it out. But came over here, made St. Cloud my home my second home from home. And love this community. And as the mayor called me a St. Cloud kid, first time I heard that, but I think it's fitting. Nevertheless, in my professional capacity, what we take great pride in is that we really call them as we see them. And I'm not here to kind of dole out any favors. I'm really going to be presenting the facts and what I think makes sense. And So it's also a little bit of an outsider's perspective. And when I thought about downtown St. Cloud, what comes to mind? And what really comes to mind to me is that there's very little residential. There's a little bit of, kind of a little bit of rental and a little bit of public housing downtown. But generally, there's very little, and you can see this on these two maps. On the left, this is homes that have sold over the last 5 years, and on the right is homes that are for rent. And if you kind of looking at the downtown areas, there's very, very little in terms of housing. So that's the first thing that stood out. Second thing that stood out is when I look at downtown, the points of interests, and by points of interest, I really mean the things that people go to on an almost daily basis. It's not very well mixed, and you have mostly restaurants and bars down there. You have one coffee shop, as far as I can tell, but you don't really have any residential serving retail like a supermarket, a gym, a pharmacy, and those type of things where people really what are required for people to want to live downtown. And you also have a lot of natural barriers, as the mayor just mentioned. You have the river, you have the Division Street, and you have also the rail tracks. Those are all challenges, but they're not insurmountable. Likewise, you have not much commercial, particularly around SCSU and towards the hospital. And also in terms of the streets towards Lake George, New City Hall, the library, they seem to me, as an outsider, somewhat underutilized. And then the last thing that stood out is if you look just on the surface from a kind of satellite view on downtown St. Cloud, there's a lot of surface parking, a ton of surface parking. And I've just colored here the areas that are in yellow that are surface parking lots, and that's just very underutilized space. And as I was thinking about these three things, I was reading the other day in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times about Fargo. And Fargo has undergone quite a rapid transformation of its downtown. And Fargo, obviously, just a couple minutes, up the road from here. But here, if you look at Fargo back in 2005, it's the same map from a satellite view, and kind of the yellow areas are again the surface parking lots, underutilized spaces. And you can see, if I go back to St. Cloud, it doesn't look all that different, right? Fargo back in 2005. Now look at Fargo today, and particularly if you focus on that area with the red circle around it, they've gotten rid of pretty much all the surface parking lots in that red area. But also, if you look around, a lot of the surface parking lots are gone. So how did they do it? And they've really transformed the entire downtown, about 100-block area. They've been completely transformed. How did it start? It started in 2001 with NDSU, North Dakota State University, moving part of its campus to downtown. That brought in a lot of students and vibrancy to the core. In 2002, they came up with a redevelopment plan for downtown that all got things moving. But then over the years, they stuck with it and really moved progressively the ball forward, and that's something very important as a lesson. If you, as the mayor said, if this is your top priority, you really need to stick with it, because otherwise it's not gonna work over the long run. But if you look at the transformation that Fargo has undertaken, it's really breathtaking. If you look at the property values, they have increased by tenfold over the last 15 years. Likewise, it's booming. ZipRecruiter ranked Fargo as one of the number one hottest job market, and WalletHub called it one of the best places to raise kids. So that's a stunning transformation. Here's one example of Broadway development, because this is a $110 million project that kind of took one of those surface parking lot and really transformed it into this building on the lower left that you can see. On the top you see what it looked like back in 2011, and now you can see how it has changed, including with this little park up in the corner there. But the interesting quote from that is, it looked really cool, but a lot of people in the room said, it'll never happen, right? So that's also a lesson to be taken away. You really, you need to have the confidence this is going to work, and you need to convince people that this is going to work. And there's always going to be people that are going to be the naysayers. But if you have a critical mass of people that are convinced that this can happen, this will happen, as the example of Fargo shows. And now Fargo has a very vibrant downtown area. You can see that here, lots of commercial activity, lots of retail, lots of stores, and a nice mix. And one of the quotes in the newspaper summed it up. Downtown used to be a place where you got drunk, and now it's a place where you have a nice supper and maybe have a nice drink. So that's just kind of how Fargo has transformed. You have many stores of all types and stripes, oftentimes very inexpensive. And here's another example where they've taken the surface parking lot at the top back in 2011. If you look at it today, you have this commercial on the first floor, retail on the first floor, and you have an apartment building on top. But what's also interesting, if you look at that red circle there, that's actually an entrance to a parking garage. And if you look at it it's the same block here, just looking at it from an angle and from behind, you can see that the parking garage is actually boxed in the middle of the block, and it makes perfect sense, right? Because it's a parking garage, you don't really need any windows. If you have apartments, you need windows, and that's why the apartments are around, and the parking garage is in the middle. So it's really utilizing the space, the limited space that you have downtown in a very efficient manner. Here's another example, looked in 2007, empty surface parking lot. Now 2021, what it looks like. You have this new building that came in, and just kind of, in terms of walkability, think about what it does to walkability. The picture in the bottom looks much more walkable than the one on the top where you have the surface parking lot. And here's another one. It doesn't not just need to be surface parking lots that are underutilized. You also have, had this gas station in downtown. That's certainly not the highest and best use of the land, and that was eventually torn down and replaced with this condominium apartment complex here. So what are the lessons from that? What makes downtowns like Fargo successful? And there are a couple factors. Certainly it needs to be mixed use. You need to have, kind of leisure spaces, oftentimes on the first floor stores with some parking, second floor is residential. So mixed use, very important. Walkability, very, very important. You need to need parks, trails, green spaces. It needs to be pedestrian and bicycle friendly. All that. If you have scenery, in particularly water, access to water like the Mississippi, it's a huge plus. People want to hang out around the water, around nice scenery. St. Cloud has that, so that's a huge asset. Entertainment, gathering spaces, those are very important because they bring people downtown, especially in the early phases of development. People oftentimes have a perception about downtown, right? And you can only change the perception if people actually come downtown and see it firsthand. And their friends and neighbors tell them about downtown, so that's very important by having gathering spaces to bring people downtown. Retail, jobs, municipal and economic anchors really help if you have a university, hospital, a county seat, right? County offices. Those are employers that don't go away, and the private sector you can build around that. Parking is obviously very important in Fargo. Got rid of its surface parking lots, but they replaced them with parking garages. And, of course, it takes people a little time to get used to, but parking is parking. And also clean and safe is very important, especially the perception of clean and space. And if I look at, I've crunched numbers for the whole country, and downtown St. Cloud may have a perception that it's very crime-ridden, but it is really not. If you look at the data, it's not borne out. And historic buildings, architecture, right, that's all great. And then the vibe oftentimes helps. Like, kind of if you think about Georgetown, Nashville, or New Orleans, those are all famous for having a vibe. The simple formula is really jobs, residents, plus tourists, plus entertainment, and then walkability is really a key piece. That gets you resiliency and attractiveness. So what are the strengths and opportunities of St. Cloud, and as I see them? And one of the strengths is this anchors that I just mentioned, SCSU, the hospital, and also having the county downtown. There's still plenty of affordable housing in St. Cloud, not just in downtown, but all of St. Cloud. It's certainly much more affordable than in the cities, and that can be a huge draw to attract talent to your city. There's a huge vote of confidence. There's a Starbucks just opening right off the vision. Starbucks doesn't go to places where they think they're going to be in decline. Starbucks goes to places that are growing, and that are growing rapidly. If you look at across the country, what's the number one location for Starbucks? Where have they opened the most Starbucks? Boise, Idaho. Why? Because Boise, Idaho is growing like gangbusters. And the hospital, great hospital, ranked 45th in the country, so that's something to build on. Also downtown, there's the potential for a medical school coming in, I hear, and you have a new children's museum that's coming, so children bring vibrancy. It's all great. And if I may add to climate change, I love St. Cloud, but boy, it is cold. I would really love to come back more often or even live here if it was just a couple degrees warmer. So, kind of in a couple years down the road, we may get there. I'm somewhat joking here, but not really. So what are the opportunities? Well, as I said, there's a lot of surface parking lot, and you're right, like Fargo, you can really utilize it. St. Cloud is really a suburb of the Twin Cities, especially now with work from home and the COVID pandemic that has really shown us that people can work from home, and people are now no longer tied to an employer, but they can move a little bit further away. And if you have an attractive downtown area, that can attract people from the cities, particularly because housing here is much, much more affordable. And you can also, you have Lake George, you have the Paramount Theater, you have the river, you have all the scenery that you can use to really build a brand, and you have all these festivals around downtown that you can really build on to draw more people downtown to shape their perception or change their perception that downtown is really a great place to be. And especially as development unfolds, it's really great to keep these festivals going to bring people downtown. Walkability is an amenity, and cities can certainly add to it. The way this oftentimes works is that government needs to get out of the way, and government needs to get the conditions right, but then it needs to let the private sector take over. And the government can, as the mayor said earlier, government can shut down a lot of things if they get it wrong, but if they get it right, they can create the conditions for the private sector to take it to the next level. Money also follows monies. If you have attracted people, you're going to get business and jobs will follow eventually. So the key is really to make downtown more attractive. And Rochester, Duluth, the mayor just went through. He stole my thunder on that one. Thank you. If you look at the two pictures, you have a lot of these strip mall areas, right? But you can easily transform them by putting in bike lanes, by changing the zoning to allow mixed use development, where you have stores on the first level and then housing on the next couple levels. You can really, if you put in some trees, it's really not that expensive from a city perspective in terms of public infrastructure. It's actually quite inexpensive because ultimately you're going to drive up property values and you're going to bring in more people that you can tax. So that's ultimately, it's going to more or less, it's going to generate a lot of revenue that's going to pay for a lot of these upgrades. Another piece is the housing piece, and what we at the Housing Center have found is gradual development is really, I think, the key, and what we call it light touch density, because it's not building really high-rise development that overnight transform the entire neighborhood. But what we're advocating is for duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes, some row houses, particularly as you get further away from the downtown. In the downtown area, go for it, right? I mean, Fargo has done it. You can do more dense, but as you move further and further out, you want to go with this light touch density approach because people are just more familiar with light touch than really high density. And here's some examples, kind of where you as you are close to the commercial areas, you just upzone. As a city, you can upzone these neighborhoods a little bit, and then when prices start rising, once downtown starts becoming more expensive and the property values increase and the land becomes more expensive, it makes sense to tear down these old houses that have been oftentimes run down, and especially in the university area where you have a lot of inexpensive housing geared towards students, but that's not going to cut it for young professionals that have disposable income. So you want to gradually replenish that aging housing stock with something that's newer yet still affordable, because by allowing on this gradual light touch density, you can actually ensure that the housing stays relatively affordable. And then, the final piece of advice is there's really no time like the present, and you want to think big and bold on this, and the biggest winners from this are going to be local developers, contractors, and property owners, and in general the residents of St. Cloud, of the St. Cloud area, because if you revitalize downtown, this is going to be a place where people want to come, hang out, and have a nice supper, not just get drunk. As I said, oftentimes too, we're going to have a lot of economic challenges with our growing population. This is a way of attracting people and talent. And the cities that they're not going to be able to attract talent, they're going to be struggling to attract employees. And an attractive downtown is certainly a way of recruiting students for the university, but also attracting local talent for a hospital or for all the employers that you have in the city. And also from a taxpayer perspective, if you have a successful downtown where you bring in new people, high income people, you can broaden the tax base and you can gradually lower the tax rate for everyone. So everyone really benefits from this development, and we have lots of case studies where we found that this is the case, where if you get this right and you get the development correct, then it's not just the people that own the properties, but you can spread the benefits much more broadly by lowering tax rates for everyone. With that, I'll turn it back to the mayor.
So I want to talk about why you might want to consider doing this, and also build upon what Tobias, I know him as Tobias. Actually, Tobias and I are partners in Places Platform. So we work together a lot on trying to quantify how we build our cities. And so I want to tell why we should be doing this, and then look at, let me see where I can, there we go. Ta-da. And then look at examples of downtowns, your own size. Almost all of them are primarily Republican towns, and they were in really sad shape 20 years ago. And they have really made remarkable strides to expand their economic base, to expand their tax base, and to give everybody in the town a place to call their own. So there's a lot of comparables out there over the last 20 years. If I was giving this talk 20 years ago, there would be very few. But there's a lot of towns out there and I would urge a lot of you to go see these towns and talk to the mayors of those towns and talk to the developers and talk to the people that live there so as to see. So let's start with why downtown. That when the gray hairs in this room, including myself, grew up, this was an industrial economy. And you probably know in your gut that it was driven by the car business. That roughly 40% of all jobs, directly and indirectly, were related to the raw materials going into the manufacturing, providing the fuel for, insuring, financing them themselves, and building the roads for the automobile. So it only made sense that we would build our cities around cars. And if you remember the Chevy commercial of "See the USA in your Chevrolet," well, we did that. In fact, we built this country to make it a safe place for cars. And we wanted that, and we in real estate built drivable suburban places. And I think you can agree that we've done a pretty good job doing that. So the thing is, it's important to note that there's only two ways to build a metropolitan area. That's it, two ways. One is walkable urban, higher density, a mix of uses, multiple ways to get around, not just a car, but trucks and trolleys and bicycles and walking. And the other way is drivable suburban, which we in this country invented. And it's obviously gone worldwide. So drivable suburban is we segregate land uses. Housing goes over here, and offices go over there, and retail goes over there, and the only way to get around is by cars and trucks. And again, we built that way because it made us wealthy and made a lot of you wealthy. And so prior to 1940, really prior to 1920, it was beginning to transition, 20s and 30s, that almost all of our towns were just walkable urban. We didn't have cars. We didn't have that many of them. But after the Second World War, we, of course, invented drivable suburban communities. And that's what we in real estate provided to all of us. and it changed everything about how we work and how we play. And the best way to understand this, and this shows you the depth of my academic research, is to go to the most important movie about the built environment, and that's Back to the Future. This is a movie that shows those two ways of building, walkable urban and drivable suburban, over 3 different time periods. This was done in the mid-'80s. The 2 Hollywood writers nailed it in all of those 3 times. So I want to start with 1955, downtown Hill Valley. Now, it's important to note, we in real estate name things after what we destroy and then put on top. So somebody knocked the hill down, put it into the valley, Hill Valley. And you'll see that this comes up a couple times during these clips. So this is downtown Hill Valley, 1955, when Marty McFly goes back in time. And just for you old farts like myself, it's how we grew up. So the courthouse, gorgeous plaza, retail on the ground floor, office or residential up above. It's a glorious place. And again, it's how most of us grew up. The zoning in almost every jurisdiction in this country, that's illegal. It's not allowed based upon current zoning. So, but even in 1955, there is the seeds of change were being planted. This is the billboard that Marty McFly parked his DeLorean behind. And it's the billboard for the subdivision that he was born in the early 60s. And that was the seeds of change, of the coming of drivable suburbanism. So now let's fast forward to 1985 and go back to downtown in 1985. It's a little bit different. So X-rated movie theater, the plaza's been paved over, the homeless. So now he's going out to the real center in 1985 of their town. And I think you know where that is. So this, of course, is the regional mall, which absolutely emptied out the downtown of all the retail. And by the way, Lone Pine Mall, that was named after the farm that was called Twin Pines. But then he knocked down one of the pine trees with his car. And so now it's Lone Pine Mall, and of course the farm's gone, and the regional mall's there. Now, the thing is that the economy's changed, and it's now the knowledge economy. And the next economy layering on top of it is the experience economy. And this is not to say that of course, agriculture and industrial is going away. Not so, but far otherwise. That it's just becoming far more efficient. And the knowledge economy is fundamentally changing those 2 industries. We have the most productive agricultural economy on the planet. And we have probably the second most productive manufacturing economy on the planet. And that's becoming more and more productive and efficient based upon the knowledge economy's inputs. But what that means is fewer people work there. So we had a peak of about 35 people, or 35% of the workforce back when we were growing up, we gray hairs were growing up, were working in the industrial economy. Now it's 8% is working in the industrial economy, and it's going gangbusters, but it's only 8%. In the farm economy, back in the 20s, it was, about 40% of us were farmers. Today, it's under 2%. So incredibly productive, incredibly efficient, but the growth is in the knowledge economy. And what the knowledge economy is demanding is both drivable suburban and walkable urban, but we have very little walkable urban. The pent-up demand is for walkable urban stuff to be built. And you're not providing enough of it for what the market wants. What's happened is that that pendulum is being pushed back, demanding walkable urbanism over the last 20 years throughout this country. And of course, Back to the Future saw it, because in the near distant future, that Marty goes forward in time to this near distant future and looks at, so here's downtown Hill Valley in this near distant future. And it's been completely rebuilt. The plaza's back as a community gathering spot. All the buildings have been rehabbed. Again, retail on the ground floor and housing or office up above. Some of them have been torn down. He got everything right, except one thing. They always promise us flying cars. We never get flying cars. And when was that near distant future? October 21st, 2015. They nailed it. Because this is in the heart of the revival of our downtowns throughout this country. And again, why to do this? Because the knowledge economy demands it. Now, it's hard for you to see this, but I will walk you through it. These are the top 30 metros in the country. And what we're showing you is the most walkable, Washington and Boston and Denver and New York City, and the least walkable, Orlando, Phoenix, San Antonio, Las Vegas. And when you look at the educational attainment of these towns, the most walkable has that the workforce, people between 25 and 64, that 42% of their workforce has their college education. The lowest 7, it's 31%. That's a 35% premium of more college-educated people are in the most walkable places. There's a reason for that. And what does that mean? You make more money. This is the same chart of the most walkable in the upper right-hand corner and the least walkable in the lower left-hand corner. The most walkable, on average, per capita, GDP per capita, is $75,000 per man, woman, and child in the most walkable metros. In the least walkable, it's $49,000. That's a 52% increase in GDP per capita. The market is telling us something, and you've got to respond, or you float and continue to drift. And we're seeing this now in virtually every one of the large metro areas. Now, my research tends to focus on the large ones. The case studies are all small, all comparable to St. Cloud. But what we're seeing in like Washington, where a third, in 2010, a third of all the walkable, or a third of all the space in the region was walkable urban. 1/3 was high density, mixed use, walkable stuff. But over the last 10 years, 91% of the new stuff built in metropolitan Washington was walkable urban. 91%, only 9% was drivable suburban. And that's a 2.8 times factor that the market share is growing while drivable suburban is losing market share. At the other end of the spectrum is Dallas-Fort Worth, a very drivable place. Only 9% of the stuff, the housing and the office and the multifamily in 2010 was a walkable urban, and 21% of the new stuff built during the 2010s was walkable urban. Well, that's 2.3 times growth. So while it's starting from a lower base, it's growing almost 3 times faster for walkable urbanism. So what we're seeing in all 30 of the top towns is expansion of the market share for walkable urban and a decline in the market share for drivable suburban. The market's telling us something. So let's look at some examples. So here's downtown Chattanooga, one of my favorite small towns. I've been working on downtown Chattanooga for 30 years. And this town, about 426,000 people in the town and in the entire metro area, is right on the Tennessee River, just like you are on the Mississippi River. In the upper left-hand corner is their new freshwater aquarium coming out of the first strategic planning process that I led down there. They got together, they wanted to do 14 different things all at once. First thing they wanted to do was build the world's largest freshwater aquarium, and they financed it privately. And it exploded in growth. It's a great tourist attraction. It's also a great attraction for fishermen, by the way. All the fishermen up in the mountains want to come down because they have the fish in place. You know, they have recreated streams in this aquarium, and the fishermen come to see where the fish lie. The fish lie under the curved out course of the river. They'd never seen this before. And they would come and study how do the fish lay in the water. And of course, they've addressed the Tennessee River. They have a river walk, just like you've been putting in here. And a lot of festivals, water-based festivals. And then across the river, sound familiar? Across the river, they have another downtown adjacent place that was a former naval yard for the Navy, and it's turned into a park, and it has a whole different character to the place, a little bit more gritty. And here's downtown Chattanooga. The interesting thing, and I would urge you to think about this carefully because this is so comparable to what you are right now. Here's downtown, and then here's the north side of the river, going across the river. This is the arts concentration. There's 3 or 4 art galleries up on the bluff over the Tennessee River. Here's UT Chattanooga. University of Tennessee Chattanooga had turned their back on the downtown. Now it's fully integrated into the downtown. And here's the south side where there's this great farmers market and a bunch of other stuff taking place. So it's not just downtown. It's 360 degrees around downtown that should be participating in downtown adjacent renewal. Here's downtown Charlottesville. And this is, again, another university town and the downtown. And they're 2 separate places, 2 different target markets. So the University of Virginia is about a mile away from downtown. But here's downtown with great outdoor festivals, concerts. Here is their version of the Paramount here. Here's Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids is such a treat. Now it's a bigger town. It's about 1 million. And again, an industrial town, still quite industrial. Steelcase and a lot of other furniture manufacturers are there. But it's, for instance, in this upper left-hand corner, here's downtown with all the high-rises, bridges going across downtown to the west side, which is where the university is and where the President Ford Library is, and with a pedestrian and bike access between the 2 sides of the river. Lots of festivals, and who would have thought? They have a thing called Art Prize, 2 weeks every fall. They have 3,500 artists come to display and compete in Art Prize. And they're in these paintings and sculptures are in bars, they're in the convention center, they're in the middle of the river, they're everywhere that they could be. It's the world's largest art competition. Grand Rapids, Michigan. Who'da thunk? Downtown Greenville, about 600,000 people. That's a really cool town. that they move their baseball stadium downtown only makes sense. Arenas, baseball stadiums make more money downtown, and they create economic development. You put them outstanding in their field, zero economic development, and about 60% of the attendance. They belong downtown. Not football stadiums. I played football in college, but no, football stadiums don't belong downtown. Baseball and soccer and, of course, arenas. And another great thing they did is that they had, like many towns, like your town, you're here because of the river, and these are at the fall line. And so at the fall line, you can't get ocean-going ships further up. Well, they covered that fall line and the beautiful falls with a giant road. You couldn't see them. You couldn't see the falls. Took the road out. It's now a great tourist attraction. Greenville is probably the leading small city in this country in attracting European corporate headquarters in the US. They have all these German companies, all these French companies coming to Greenville. And the reason? Their executives demand a vibrant downtown. You're not going to get international companies without having a vibrant downtown, because that's what they're used to. Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I worked on their downtown strategy 15 years ago, and it's just a delight. It also has a college, Franklin and Marshall College, that hooked up with Lancaster General Hospital to form the James Street Improvement District. That was the street that linked the two of them. And that Franklin and Marshall used to have a section of town very similar to what you have around the university, the student ghetto, single-family houses, broken up, trashed. That's where you go to drink until you get drunk, drink until you puke. And that Franklin and Marshall got the kids out of those neighborhoods so that those neighborhoods could regenerate as single-family housing, and built student housing on a railroad track or on a rail yard, and with retail on the ground floor, lots of student activity, lots of neighborhood activities right at the campus. And then Lancaster General is now reaching out into the community, building housing for their docs and for their staff. Meanwhile, downtown, they have a 150-year-old Central Market that's sort of the anchor of downtown. It's what grocery stores used to be. We now call them food halls. But they've been around for centuries. And this one, the Central Market, happens to have been around for the last 150 years. But one of the things Lancaster has done that I've seen in so many towns, like Grand Rapids, is the focus on the arts. Urbanism, the knowledge economy, you must have the arts represented. And so they have a First Friday art walk every month. They have a new college of art in downtown Lancaster. And by the way, that just reminds me, I was talking about Savannah. There's another town where the arts has fundamentally turned around Savannah. The College of Savannah is the most successful art school in the world. They have redeveloped over 100 buildings in downtown Savannah over the last 25 years. And it's a glorious town. And it's all because of the arts. Then you may not like Ann Arbor because of the other I did teach there, I hate to say, at least in this state. But they've got a Main Street for their locals, the literal Main Street, which is for grown-ups, and then they've got State Street next to the university for the students. And in between is the hottest residential market in town. It's where all the alums want to come back. The Michigan alums, they bleed blue. They are just rabid about the university. And they're coming back to retire in Ann Arbor, in between the State Street retail concentration and the Main Street retail concentration. And this is one that is just a treat. Carmel, Indiana, not Carmel. If you pronounce it Carmel, they're going to think that you're a smarty pants Californian. It's Carmel. And the mayor of Carmel, Mayor Brainerd, has been mayor for 25 years. So almost what you're, How long you been in? 17. Yep. And his focus, number one focus, has been on downtown. And not just, the upper left corner is the old downtown, the 19th century, early 20th century downtown. It's completely restored, completely back economically. There's not one chain store. It's all mom and pops. There's not one vacancy. And this was during COVID, was the last time I was there, about a year and a half ago. And they've got the largest collection of Seward Johnson sculptures in the world. They probably have 150 of them. And then lower left is their Greenfield Performing Arts Center. It's about a mile south. City Hall is there, a performing arts center, a theater, a separate theater, and a high-density mixed-use residential on top of retail. All brand new stuff. And then in between is this 1 mile long bike and walk path with mid-rise condos and townhouses up and down them. Great story. When I was walking down that path at one point, it started to rain. I didn't have an umbrella, and I just said, fine, I'll get wet. I won't die. And two guys were walking behind me, and they said, I see you don't have an umbrella. Take one of ours, because we can share one. That's never happened to me in my entire life. And I mean, it might just be Midwest niceness, but I pretty much think it's bringing us all together in one place as humans, and it brings out the better angels of ourselves. Couple more. One is Santa Fe, where I used to live. I raised my kids in Santa Fe. And here's a town, 150,000 in this region, 60 miles from Albuquerque. And it's just festivals galore. The retail that has completely full retail, all mom and pop around this 400-year-old plaza. I was involved. I was the head of the redevelopment agency and purchased the 50-acre rail yards, did the planning for it, established a nonprofit development corporation. It's now all built out. Parks, arts, community gathering spot, the train station for downtown Santa Fe. And that's a downtown adjacent place. And then another downtown adjacent place is Canyon Road. It's the arts district. So it all goes back to, it's not just downtown, it's the downtown adjacent places. And here's something that my development company is doing right now. It's under construction. Doylestown, Pennsylvania. It's the county seat of Bucks County. And it's a very lively little downtown. This is their Paramount Theater, called the County Theater. And but it's a little ragged around the edges. So what my development partner did is so here is, where's this? This is downtown. This is where all the restaurants are. This is where the County Theater is. And then about 3 blocks north, we purchased 2 parcels of land on Main Street. Again, 3 blocks down to Main and Main. This is what it looked like before we got there, just obsolete industrial. And this is the first project to deliver in just a few months. 60 rental apartments that, as I say, its walk scores about 76, maybe 80, and will help continue that great revitalization process taking place in Doylestown. The thing that I found about these downtowns is that it's more is better. As you add more assets, it starts an upward spiral. And once you start that moving, you can't stop it. And everything begins to move upward. So I'll just end by the first and foremost thing to do is, do you have the intention to do this? Do you really want in your belly to make downtown the place to bring you all together, socially, economically, and a place that you can be proud of, that somebody comes to visit you from out of town, they come downtown with you. Second is, just as Tobias mentioned, and also the mayor, to really assess your assets and deficits. Craft a strategy. complicated strategy, 14 cylinders firing at once over the next 3 to 5 years, and get an action plan in place to figure out next month what's going to be done to help implement that strategy. And as the mayor mentioned, it should be a private-public partnership. I flipped the terms intentionally. All the studies show that for every $1 of public money invested, there's going to be $10 to $20, or $10 to $15 of private money invested. So I'm a great believer in both definitions of the golden rule. You know what the biblical phrase is, of course, but the other definition of the golden rule is he with the gold rules. And the private sector is going to be putting in the most money. They need to be taking the leadership position, working with the city. So hopefully you'll get to work. Thank you.
The invite says this is done at 7:15. I'll be done in 3 minutes. Otherwise, we'll go over. But 65% of the people in this room will be dead in 20 years. It's a fact. And so the challenge then is, how do we build a new future for tomorrow? The real challenge we have is a people problem. Certainly in an organization our size with 13,000 employees, we have lots of different opinions. Is that fair? We have a lot of different opinions. And so the video that I was going to show you was a centering document about who we serve. We serve people. Your business does. Centricare does. And sometimes in the strategic planning or the business planning that we do, we tend to like the way it was yesterday. We like to live in today, and tomorrow wants to be based on the yesterday or today. I'd like to suggest to you that's faulty thinking, particularly today. So the people problem has to do with understanding, number one, who your customers are. Number two, how as we as leaders rise to the occasion of crafting a different tomorrow. And I'd like to mention a third people challenge. And I think that the confluence of a lot of events in America are hitting rural America particularly hard. So I'm just going to give you some facts. 50% of the kids that go to school in our schools are on free or reduced lunches. That is astounding. The socioeconomic status of rural Minnesota continues to fall, and many of our communities that we serve have a 2% per annum decrease in population, and there are just fewer kids around. You can see it in the enrollment of state colleges throughout Minnesota. So not only is it about the customers we serve, not only is it about us as leaders coming up with new solutions, it's about how do we understand that the market is fundamentally changing. And we have to embrace all three of those realities at the same time. Even though I'm from Iowa and hockey was not a state sport in Iowa, I have become fond of the phrase that described Wayne Gretzky. How many of you know it? He skated where the puck's going to be. So the question I have for you, are you willing to skate to where the puck is going to be? And I would finish with two closing comments. If not us, then who? And if not now, then when? With that, I will finish.
Well, that was brief. But Ken, one of the things I like, and Ken has been a tremendous friend to our community, and he's been a tremendous leader in our area. But Ken is, what I really like about Ken is Ken gets things done. And he came in to lead Centricare a few years ago and took a direction and laid out a goal and some plans and got it done. And that's an important thing. And the reason Ken was on this panel today, and the reason a lot of you are in this, and those of you who got invitations to be here and the task force we put together, is because you're people who get things done. And that's an important piece. In order for us to take a vision forward, it's going to take leaders. It's going to take a lot of folks. I mean, this is one of those things that doesn't matter. This is an issue that doesn't matter what your political stripes are. It doesn't matter where your socioeconomic status is. No matter who you are. This is a critical part of what's going to really take our community in the right direction, and that is a vibrant downtown. And in all analysis, everything that we've done that points to that, all the studies you've seen. And I didn't ask, you know, again, and this was because if I would have edited a few things both of you said. But they said what their external part of this, and I think Ken said it best. It's a matter. It's going to take folks to do that, and it really is. We know where things are going. You do have to. I agree with that quote about being, you know, go skate where the puck is. I know Matt Glazeman will appreciate that too. Our hockey folks here. This is something that is achievable. We have set goals in this community many times, and we've achieved those goals. We've got a wonderful team representing us, you know, at the federal and the state level, and at the local level. There's a lot of folks in this room from that government piece. But I think, as all folks have said, and I know it really is going to take the private sector. It's going to take the community to make this happen. There's nothing that has ever succeeded that didn't have that, and that's why we take the bones of it, the basic piece, and that's the vision that has been developed over the several years. Those pieces are there. We need to refine it. We need to create a strategy to get it done, and that is going to be on a fast track. I know that the city is committed to doing that. I know there's a lot of folks in this room. I've talked to a lot of people over the last several months about their commitment to downtown and their commitment to St. Cloud. It's going to take that. There's a lot of pieces to this, but we've got a really vibrant community, and I think we're moving in the right direction, and we take advantage of the time that we're in. This is an opportunity to reset, to reboot. You know, COVID's given that opportunity to step back a little bit and look. I need to single out one entity, and that is, you know, we've already, and this is something we don't just start from this day going forward. A lot of things have been already in place and in motion. And one, I want to single out the Chamber of Commerce. Julie Lenning is here from the Chamber of Commerce, and the folks that used to be part of the Downtown Council, and those folks really worked hard. These were all volunteers. There's no entity in the Downtown Council. These were all volunteers for the last few years. And now with the creation of the Downtown Alliance, which is housed under the Chamber of Commerce, Bob Johnson, who we've mentioned the Paramount several times tonight. Bob runs a very successful theater in downtown, and Bob is now the new chair of the Downtown Alliance, along with a group of folks that are in this room. So that really sets that piece, that marketing piece, that events piece, the piece that's really part of that. But this next group is going to be, then we'll assemble, and I hope, you know, I don't know, we're Kathy Mahelich, Matt Glazeman, Matt Staling, some of our folks. If, you know, please reach out. We were going to do what we're going to, I know all of, and Ken, we actually are getting done early, so this is a first for me at anything I've ever been to. 7:30, so that's even better. But I know these folks will stay around. If you have questions, please, for another 45 minutes, we'll be around all to answer those questions. Come up if you want to be involved in this as we move forward with the task force and all the other things. You know, a lot of folks I see around this room that have always been part of this downtown. You got a lot of businesses, you got a lot of property. There's a lot of folks here in the arts, and I really appreciate that, because really the arts is what makes a community livable, and we need to capitalize on that, and we're going to do that. So with that, I am going to close, and these folks will be around for questions and answers. Please come up to me or some of the folks I point our staff to if you want to be involved in this. I hope everybody in this room is involved in this, because we can take this forward. Thank you for being here on a Monday night and thank you for being part of our community.